A new study is warning that current climate policies will leave more than a fifth of humanity living in dangerously hot temperatures by the year 2100. The research, coordinated by the University of Exeter in the UK, highlights the risk of failing to tackle the climate emergency.
Lewin and her family are sheltering from extreme heat. As temperatures outside soar above 40 degrees Celsius, they've taken to sitting still just to survive.
I went outside last week, and when I came back, I was sick. I'm still weak and sweaty, and I don't want to eat anything or move around too much. I think it was heat stroke.
Myanmar was one of many places in Southeast Asia recently hit by record heat. It was similar in India, a hotspot for people living in dangerous temperatures, according to climate scientists, who warn it is set to get much worse. Currently, around 60 million people on Earth live in dangerous heat, where average temperatures are 29 degrees or above. By the end of this century, that number will grow to 2 billion, based on current population and temperature projections.
So that's like a profound reshaping of the habitability of the surface of the planet, and it could lead potentially to large-scale reorganisation of where people live.
Such massive social upheaval like that seen here in Somalia can be avoided, but only if governments act urgently.
To achieve the rate of change we need to limit global warming anywhere near 1.5 degrees C means something like a 5 times speeding up of the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions or the decarbonisation of the global economy.
Among the ways to do that, accelerate social and technological change by expanding renewable energy projects like this one and giving up fossil fuels altogether.
Joyta Gupta is Professor of Environment and Development in the Global South at the University of Amsterdam. I asked her if we should assume that urgent climate action will only be taken when rich industrialised nations are themselves repeatedly hit by extreme weather catastrophes.
No, I don't think we should assume that, because that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways. I think we as scholars and you as journalists have a very strong role to play in trying to pressurize our governments to take action, whether in the global north or in the global south. And in fact, I think that it will be global south countries that will put pressure on the global north, because the temperatures in the global south are really getting very, very hot. We just now heard that 60 million people are living in dangerous areas, but in fact, it's also about 600 million people who are living outside the human niche in this paper. So it's a huge number of people that are being affected, and this will affect drinking water, food supplies, food security, conflict. It's going to be a big problem. So I expect that the global south will put much more pressure on the global north to take action. And I also expect that our children, the youth in the north, will also do so.
And away from the extreme events, how is climate change already impacting our day-to-day lives?
The cost of living is going up everywhere. I mean, the cost of water, the cost of food, the predictability of your agricultural production is changing. Many of us live in Western countries, so then we don't really experience this as a problem if we have enough money. But if you are students in the West and you don't have enough money, you can feel this in your budget. But for the developing countries, it's very, very expensive now to purchase fresh vegetables, fresh fruit. Even grains are becoming much more expensive. Farmers are going out of business because they can't predict when they should seed their soils and how these plants will grow. So the day-to-day life is changing everywhere, and especially in the developing world. But I mean, there are forest fires in the United States quite regularly. You see forest fire warnings on the roads when you drive there. So it is quite worrying to see that even though in a country like the United States that faces a massive number of extreme weather events and forest fires, that it's so difficult for the government to take action.
Right. And climate experts, including yourself, have blamed the hunt for profits for fueling global warming. Why do fossil fuels so often win out over sustainable energies?
Because I think fossil fuel companies want to please their shareholders, and there is much more money to be made in fossil fuel than there is to be made in renewable. It's also the nature of the industry. The fossil fuel industry is much more of a monopoly type industry compared to some of the renewable energy industries. Moreover, what we find is that fossil fuel infrastructure is so gigantic. I mean, it's the pipes, it's the electricity grids. This infrastructure is so big that we are all sort of locked into it, and it's very difficult to get out of it. So in some ways, the fossil fuel companies feel that they have never made so much profit as they do currently, and many of them don't yet feel the pain of liability suits. It's starting. People are holding them to account in courts and trying to put pressure on them, but we also notice that they are not yet accounting for this possible change in the atmosphere around them, and the fact that many young people do not want to work for fossil fuel companies. That is something that will probably affect them. But of course, I am hoping that we can collectively put pressure on these fossil fuel companies, both multinationals, but also national oil companies, which are perhaps further away from the public purview, to make sure that they change their behavior.
Understood. Thank you so much for outlining that so clearly, Professor. Professor Joyita Gupta from the University of Amsterdam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm joined now by Ernest Afismama. He's a climate scientist working with the World Meteorological Organization, focusing on the impact of climate change across Africa. Ernest, it's good to have you with us. This is another study that joins a long list of warnings about the dire consequences of climate change. How do you expect greater exposure to extreme heat to worsen the situation across Africa?
Well, I sincerely appreciate your intro that really has characterized what is really happening around the globe. And in particular, Africa, we've seen significant climate variability and change that is contributing to socioeconomic impacts. We've been experiencing temperatures that are increasing, resulting in more intense heat waves. Rainfall is increasingly erratic, with marked seasonal deficits. We have also, we're experiencing droughts that appear to be increasingly frequent. Mm-hmm. And we see these kind of occasional heavy rainfall events that are causing severe drought, severe flooding. You can see that there are a lot of, quite recently, Somalia and Congo Democratic Republic experiencing this kind of erratic rainfall. And, it could be misconstrued to mean that it's been raining, over in this area, resulting to the floods. But that's not the case. These are floods, occurring in this area because of this kind of variabilities we've seen in the climate.
Ernest, let me ask you, what kind of support do African nations, do they need now to deal with the situation as it is right now, but also to deal with what's coming around the bend?
Well, in the past, we've been talking about mitigations, but of course, where we are right now, it's all about adaptation. And there are a lot of measures that are required, strategies to be developed. Quite recently, the call by the UN Secretary General is very pertinent, early warning for all. So in Africa, what is really currently taking place is to characterize the pillars, as it were, in the continent and begin to provide an action plan with which to see how we can have this early warning with anticipatory actions, being put in place. So these are the things we're really looking at. First, to understand the disaster risks, map out the regions that we have, and then enhance the observation and monitoring processes, and be able to disseminate and communicate this information to last mile end users, as well as try to see that we respond very quickly and take actions, that can mitigate the impact of these extreme events.
And before we run out of time, I want to ask you, why do you think governments around the world, in Africa, but all over in every continent, why are these governments failing to take action, especially when we're talking about reducing the use of fossil fuels?
Well, it's kind of an attitude, it's an apathy, the inertia to react. And, sometimes people feel, well, we can manage. But this shouldn't be the case. What we do require right now is continually, inform government of these impacts. Yes, they have been seeing these impacts in communities, but really making sure that there are policies in place. For example, what we're really doing right now is to crystallize the climate information services available and integrate that into policies of countries in their national means contributions, as well as also their national adaptation plans. Okay. This will allow for this information being generated to get to the last mile end users and have this kind of multidisciplinary approach. All stakeholders to be implicated in this process to be able to motivate government and as well as users, communities to act fast so that we can reduce these impacts.
Climate scientist Ernest Afis-Mama, we appreciate your time and your valuable insights tonight. Ernest, thank you.